June 5, 1944, Southern England. The rain comes sideways across the tarmac, cold and sharp as wire. Hundreds of aircraft stand in rows under shivering light. Inside the hangars, men check parachutes, load crates of ammunition, smoke too much, talk too little. The invasion has been delayed twice. Every delay feels like mercy. Private John Miller of the 29th Infantry Division ties his bootlaces for the third time. His hands won't stop shaking. In his breast pocket is a letter he hasn't read yet. From his wife back in Ohio, mailed before he left. He touches it once, then lets it go. The sergeant's voice cuts through the drizzle. "All right, boys, it's time." Across the Channel, in occupied France, German sentries patrol the cliffs of Normandy. They light cigarettes under their coats to hide the glow. The Atlantic wall stretches for miles. Machine gun nests, concrete bunkers, miles of wire and mines. Above them, the wind carries a low rumble they can't place. It's not thunder. It's history moving toward them. At 11:30 p.m., the first engines start. The air smells of fuel and salt. C-47s rise into the clouds, each carrying paratroopers bound for the darkness over Normandy. In the glow of the cabin lights, faces are pale, eyes wide. One man whispers a prayer in Latin. Another laughs because he doesn't know what else to do. The green light flashes. Doors open. The wind roars in. Go! 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 They leap into blackness. Far below, fields flash with tracer fire. Tiny rivers of light cutting across the sky. Some parachutes open, some don't. Men land in trees, in rivers, in enemy fire. The invasion has already begun, and most don't even know it. Back in Portsmouth, the ships begin to move. 5,000 vessels, an armada larger than the world has ever seen. Battleships, destroyers, transports, landing craft. Everyone packed with men, machines, and the quiet fear that the sea itself might turn against them. The battleship USS Texas fires the first test shell into the Channel. The echo rolls like distant thunder. On the deck, sailors stare eastward into fog. Somewhere beyond that mist lies France, and death, and something like redemption. In the mess hall of USS Samuel Chase, men sit shoulder to shoulder, helmets resting between their knees. Someone plays a harmonica. Someone else vomits into a tin can. The chaplain walks the aisle, touching shoulders, murmuring blessings no one can hear over the engine noise. At 02:30 a.m., the signal comes through the fleet. Viking, proceed. The crossing the Channel is rough. Waves slamming against flat-bottomed landing craft. Men soaked and freezing before dawn. In the dark, ships lose formation. Some ram each other. Others drift off course. Seasickness spreads like plague. The smell of fuel and vomit mixes with salt. Nobody talks. Captain Robert Hall, commanding a Higgins boat with 36 infantrymen aboard, looks at his compass every 30 seconds. He can't see the coastline, only the glow of lightning, or maybe artillery on the horizon. His pilot yells over the roar of the engine. "You sure this is the right beach?" Hall answers, "Does it matter?" At 03:15 a.m., the German coastal radar near Caen picks up a blip, then 100. Officers scramble from bunkers, disbelief on their faces. "It can't be an invasion," one says. "The weather is impossible." By 0400, the Channel horizon is solid with ships. Destroyers swing broadside and begin shelling the coast. The night explodes in orange. Cliffs shatter, bunkers crumble, the air itself shakes. To the men waiting in landing craft, the thunder sounds like salvation. In one boat, a kid named Howard presses his helmet down tight and whispers, "They'll never hit us through all that." His buddy just stares at the water and says, "They'll hit us anyway." The first grey of dawn creeps into the sky. Rain becomes mist. The wind changes. A gull glides over the armada, indifferent. Overhead, thousands of Allied aircraft roar east. Bombers drop ton after ton of explosives onto the beaches, but most fall too far inland. The German defenses remain mostly untouched. No one on the boats knows this yet. H-hour approaches. 5:30 a.m. The first landing craft begin their run toward Omaha and Utah beaches. On the USS Augusta, General Omar Bradley watches through binoculars. The coastline is still dark, only flashes where shells hit rock. He turns to his aide. "This is it," he says quietly. "No turning back." The men aboard the Higgins boats crouch shoulder to shoulder, rifles clutched to chests, helmets down. Water splashes over the bow. The smell of oil is everywhere. A coxswain shouts through a megaphone, "30 seconds!" Private Miller feels the world shrink to a square of grey steel and the pounding in his ears. He thinks of his farm, of his wife's handwriting, of the letter he never opened. 15 seconds! Another shell lands close. The boat lifts and slams down. Someone screams. The chaplain shouts, "Keep your heads down! God's watching!" 10 seconds! The ramp drops. Machine guns rake the opening before a single man can move. The front row goes down instantly. Bullets stitch the water. The sea turns black with oil and red with blood. Men leap over the sides, trying to find shelter in water that's chest deep and cold as knives. The beach has no cover, only obstacles, barbed wire, and death. From the cliffs above, German MG-42s chatter endlessly. One gunner mutters to himself, "So many, they just keep coming." He reloads, fires again. By 6:45, the first waves of American troops are pinned between sea and sand. The tide drags wounded men back into the surf. Medics try to reach them and vanish in sprays of water. Engineers struggle to clear mines, but are cut down before they can reach the wire. On board the destroyer USS Doyle, spotters call out bunker coordinates. The gunnery officer adjusts range and fires. The 5-inch guns bark in rhythm, each shot a scream of steel, trying to carve a path through chaos. On the beach, Miller crawls behind a steel obstacle shaped like a cross. 2 bullets punch through the metal inches from his face. He gasps, spits sand, looks to his left. His sergeant is gone. To his right, a radio burns. The antenna crackles and dies. "Get off the beach!" someone yells. "Where the hell do we go?" someone answers. The tide keeps rising. Further east at Utah Beach, the landings go smoother, fewer cliffs, better luck. General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., 56 years old and limping with arthritis, wades ashore with his cane and shouts, "We'll start the war from here!" His men cheer, because it's easier than crying. At Omaha, there are no cheers, only survival. The Navy calls for air support. The weather scrambles communication. Pilots circling overhead see nothing but smoke. They can't tell friend from enemy. Bombs fall randomly. One destroys a German bunker, another erases an entire American squad. The sea fills with wreckage, half-sunk boats, helmets, rifles drifting like dead birds. A priest gives last rites, knee-deep in water. His Bible is soaked. He doesn't stop. By 0800, the first small groups begin to push forward, dozens where there had been hundreds. They crawl through gaps blasted by naval fire, climb the slopes on hands and knees. The sand is slick with rain and blood. The air smells of smoke, seawater, and fear. Above them, the German commander at Pointe du Hoc radios headquarters. They are still coming. He doesn't understand why. The logic of numbers no longer applies. A squad reaches the seawall, plants explosives, detonates. A hole appears, wide enough for one man at a time. They charge through it, one after another, until only smoke remains. By 0930, American flags are visible in patches of high ground. Snipers trade fire across shattered trenches. Corpses lie side by side, indistinguishable under mud. Private Miller collapses behind a burned-out half-track. He hears the ocean, the gunfire, his own breath. Then he hears something else. A voice shouting orders in English. Reinforcements. Somehow, the impossible beach is becoming theirs. June 6th, 1944. Omaha Beach, Normandy. 9:45 a.m. The tide has turned red. Bodies roll in the surf like driftwood, tangled in wire, helmets half buried in sand. The smell of cordite and blood clings to the wind. Waves lap gently against the dead, as if trying to erase them. Private John Miller drags himself behind a rusted metal obstacle and gasps for air. His rifle is gone, his helmet dented. His hands shake as he digs at the wet sand, trying to disappear into it. All around him, the air is filled with a single sound, the endless mechanical scream of MG-42s tearing through the surf. Every few seconds, a shell lands somewhere too close. The beach lifts, falls, and the world turns white for a heartbeat. "Where's the lieutenant?" Someone yells. No one answers. A medic slides beside Miller, blood on his face, dragging a canvas bag. "You hit?" Miller shakes his head. The medic nods, looks around, moves on. He doesn't get 10 feet before a shell turns him into mist. Miller stares at the spot where he'd been, then looks away. There's nothing to do but keep moving forward. No cover, no mercy. The tide is rising faster than expected. The landing craft are still arriving, unloading more men into the same killing zone. A few tanks make it ashore but sink in soft sand before they can fire. Engineers wade through waist-deep water carrying explosives, each step a coin toss between life and death. Captain Robert Hall, soaked and furious, waves his men forward. "We've got to get off this beach!" "Sir, there's nowhere to go!" someone shouts. Hall points to the base of the cliffs. "There, we make a hole." His platoon crawls, swims, stumbles. They move from obstacle to obstacle, half-buried hedgehogs, metal crosses, bodies. Bullets snap overhead like hornets. A shell from a naval destroyer screams in and pulverizes a bunker 50 yards away. The concussion knocks everyone flat, but also clears a path. Hall laughs once, wild and short. "Thank God for the Navy." Behind them, the sea is chaos. Landing craft on fire, men jumping into the surf to escape. Over the radio, a voice crackles. "All units, this is Red Dog. Move inland. Repeat, move inland." No one knows who's still alive to hear it. By 10 a.m., small groups begin to find gaps in the wire. Engineers with Bangalore torpedoes crawl forward, sliding long tubes under the obstacles. One of them, Corporal Davis, lights the fuse and whispers, "For home." The explosion lifts sand, wire, and men alike. When it settles, there's a hole big enough for a squad. They run through, firing blind, and somehow the Germans miss enough of them that a foothold forms. From the cliffs above, German Lieutenant Kurt Wegener watches through binoculars. Smoke hides much of the beach, but he can see movement. Americans climbing, not dying. He turns to his radio man. "They're still coming." The boy hesitates. "Should I report retreat?" Wegener shakes his head. "We hold, until they walk over us." Down below, Miller finds a rifle from a fallen soldier. He wipes the sand from the bolt, checks the magazine, half full, and starts crawling toward the seawall. A shell lands near him. His ears ring. Everything slows. When the sound returns, it's like surf inside his skull. A hand grabs his shoulder. It's Sergeant Doyle, mud-covered, missing a helmet. "You alive?" "Think so." "Good. You're in charge now." "Of what?" "Whoever's left." At 10:30, destroyers move dangerously close to shore, so close that their keels scrape sand. They fire point-blank at the cliffs, silencing some machine gun nests. The concussions shake the entire beach. One shell lands short and obliterates a group of Americans trying to advance. Friendly fire doesn't discriminate. The sound of war becomes a single note, endless and metallic. Miller's group crawls forward behind the smoke. They reach a low rise littered with dead and half-dead men. Someone's radio sputters. "First Battalion, pinned, can't advance." Static swallows the rest. Above the noise, Doyle shouts, "We're taking that ridge!" Half the squad laughs at the absurdity. Then they go anyway. They run. Some fall instantly, some make it halfway. Miller doesn't remember standing. He only remembers falling behind a burned-out tank. The barrel points at the sky like an accusation. Inside, the crew are gone, their last breath turned to ash. He looks left. Doyle's still moving, throwing grenades, shouting, until a burst catches him mid-stride. Miller watches him drop, smoke curling from his back. For a moment, he can't move. Then instinct takes over. He crawls forward, dragging himself uphill through sand that feels like concrete. A grenade lands near him. He kicks it away, buries his face, waits. It doesn't explode. He laughs once, half mad. By 11:15, they reach the base of the cliff. A handful of men. No officers, no plan. Just the impossible slope ahead. Someone pulls a grappling hook from a pack, rope and faith. "We climb," Miller says. Nobody argues. The cliff is wet and slick with mud. Every step up sends stones and blood sliding down. Above, German soldiers reload, shout, toss grenades. The fragments cut the air. The climbers keep going. The world has shrunk to hands, rope, breath. Halfway up, Miller slips. A hand catches him, Private Howard, face streaked with dirt. "Don't you die on me!" he shouts. Miller nods, keeps climbing. At the top, an explosion throws two Germans out of a trench. Miller hauls himself over the edge, bayonet ready. The first German fires too high. The second hesitates. Miller lunges, and for a moment there are no sides, just men clawing at each other in the smoke. The trench is theirs. Then the next one. They toss grenades into bunkers, clear rooms one by one. The smell of gunpowder and wet earth fills every breath. By noon, a strip of land barely 50 yards deep is under American control. The cost? thousands. But they've broken the line. From the sea, General Bradley receives word that men are climbing the cliffs. "They're through," an officer reports. Bradley nods once, eyes fixed on the smoke-shrouded beach. "Hold it, boys. Just hold it." At 12:30, naval gunfire shifts inland. Artillery crews on the beach set up howitzers in sand still warm from explosions. Supplies start to arrive: ammo, rations, medics. The dead lie where they fell. The living step over them, too tired to look. Miller sits behind a dune, his uniform soaked, hands trembling. Howard drops beside him, chewing a biscuit like it's a miracle. "We made it." Miller looks at the beach, the sea beyond, the ships firing into the hills. "Yeah," he says softly. "We did." He takes the unopened letter from his pocket. The paper is damp, edges torn. He stares at the envelope for a long time, then puts it back. "Maybe later," he murmurs. Overhead, the sky clears. Sunlight cuts through the smoke for the first time all morning. The sea turns silver again, indifferent as ever. On the cliffs, American flags are planted in blood-stained earth. Radios crackle, relaying the same message across miles of chaos. "Omaha secured. Proceed inland." By 1 p.m., engineers begin clearing the last mines. Medics gather wounded into makeshift stations. Stretchers line the sand side by side, faces covered or staring at the sky. The tide keeps coming in, washing gently against boots and hands. General Bradley writes in his notebook, "The first day is always the hardest." He doesn't yet know there will be 4,400 dead before the sun sets. The sea, for all its cruelty, is calm again. The gulls return, circling above the wreckage. From offshore, the guns still fire, but the rhythm is slower, measured, almost ceremonial. Miller stands, staring inland where hedgerows and smoke hide the rest of France. "What now?" Howard asks. Miller shoulders his rifle. "Now we keep going." They walk away from the beach that nearly ate them. The wind picks up, carrying the smell of salt and gunpowder over the cliffs and fields beyond. June 6th, 1944. Afternoon, Normandy. The beach is behind them, but the war is not. The smell follows. The smell, smoke, the salt, the death. Every breath still tastes of iron. The sound of waves is replaced by the thud of artillery echoing through hedgerows that seem too peaceful for what they hide. Private John Miller and what's left of his platoon move inland through muddy fields divided by stone walls. They are supposed to meet with paratroopers from the 1st, but the roads are chaos. Nothing looks like the maps. Every farmhouse could be a fortress. Every field could explode. The hedgerows rise high on both sides, thick with roots and vines, green tunnels that turn sound into whispers. Somewhere ahead, a German machine gun opens up, short bursts, deliberate. The men drop instantly. Bullets hiss through leaves. "Where's it coming from?" Howard asks. Miller points toward a barn roof barely visible through the trees. "There." They move in silence. A single grenade arcs into the window. The explosion rips the quiet apart. For a moment, nothing moves. Then 2 Germans stumble out, hands raised, one of them bleeding from the ears. They can't be older than 20. Miller lowers his rifle. "Let 'em go," he says. "They've already lost." Behind him, Sergeant Hill spits. "You're getting soft, Miller." Miller shrugs. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired." A village in ruins. By 3 p.m., the platoon reaches a small French village called Vierville-sur-Mer. Smoke rises from the rooftops. Windows shattered. Chickens wander through the square. Somewhere a church bell rings, warped by heat and echo. The men move street by street, checking corners, clearing rooms. A sniper fires from a belfry. The bullet takes Corporal Jenkins clean through the neck. He falls without a sound. Miller looks up, spots the flash in the window. "Top of the church!" Howard and 2 others flank around the bakery. They move fast and low, burst through the church door, and climb the stairs 2 at a time. The sniper fires again, clipping Howard's sleeve. Howard throws a grenade into the tower. The blast shakes dust from the rafters. When it's over, the bell tolls once, deep and hollow. Howard leans against the wall, breathing hard. "He was just a kid," he says quietly. Miller nods. "So are we." Outside, villagers begin to emerge. Old men, women, children. They stare at the Americans like ghosts made real. A woman clutches a small tricolor flag, its colors faded. "Les Américains," she whispers. Then louder to the others, "Ils sont ici." They begin to cry, laugh, wave. One old man presses a bottle of cider into Miller's hands. Miller shakes his head. "Keep it. You'll need it more than me." The joy is fragile. A mortar shell lands at the edge of the village, and the world becomes chaos again. Screams, fire, dust. The crowd scatters. The men dive for cover. When the smoke clears, 3 houses are gone. "Keep moving," Miller shouts. "Don't stop." The hedge maze. The road out of Vierville twists into a labyrinth of hedgerows. The sun begins to fall, turning everything gold and blood. Shadows crawl across the fields. The Germans are regrouping, digging in. Every step forward costs another man. At dusk, they reach a crossroads where 2 destroyed Shermans sit like charred statues. Smoke still rises from one. The smell of burned fuel clings to everything. "Tank ambush," Hill mutters. "They're close." Miller kneels, touches the road, still warm. We go around. They move off the road, wading through thick mud, the ground sucking at their boots. The crickets have started singing. It almost sounds like peace. A flare lights the sky red. Machine guns answer. The ambush comes from both sides. Bullets chew through branches. Men dive for cover. "Return fire!" Miller shouts. The rifles reply, sharp and panicked. Grenades bloom like flowers in the dark. The smell of powder and dirt fills their lungs. Howard fires until his rifle clicks empty. "They're everywhere!" Miller tosses him another clip. "Then shoot everywhere!" The firefight lasts 5 minutes, maybe less. When it ends, the night is full of smoke and silence. Fireflies blink between corpses. Someone sobs quietly, trying not to be heard. Miller checks his men, 7 still standing. Out of 40 who landed that morning. He wipes his face with a muddy sleeve. "We're not done yet," he says. Nobody believes him, but they nod anyway. They set up camp in the ruins of a farmhouse. No roof, no doors, just walls and stars. The radio crackles, bits of English and static. They manage to catch one phrase clearly. "Paratroopers have taken Sainte-Mère-Église." Howard grins. We're not alone after all. Miller sits by the doorway, cleaning his rifle by moonlight. His hands move automatically. His mind is somewhere else. His wife's letter, still unread. He takes it out, unfolds it carefully. The words are smudged, the ink blurred by seawater. He can only read the first line. Come home safe. He folds it again. I'll try, he whispers. From the field, someone starts humming a song. Slow, tired, familiar. Others join in. Voices broken but steady. The melody drifts through the night, over the fields, over the bodies, up into the stars. It doesn't sound like victory. It sounds like survival. Morning after, June 7th, 1944. Dawn. Fog rolls over the fields like a soft blanket. The world smells of wet grass and ash. Birds sing as if nothing happened. Miller wakes to the distant sound of gunfire. The line is moving forward again. Howard brews coffee in a dented tin. We still breathing, he says. Barely, Miller answers. He stands, shoulders his rifle, looks east where the fog glows faintly gold. But that's enough. As they march, they pass more paratroopers joining the push inland, men covered in mud and bandages but smiling anyway. A tank rumbles by, its crew waving. The path is littered with abandoned helmets and broken rifles. Every object tells a story no one will have time to hear. By noon, they reach a hill overlooking the valley beyond, fields, smoke, and the faint shimmer of the sea behind them. For the first time, they can see how far they've come. For the first time, it feels like they might actually win. Miller sits in the grass, pulls off his helmet and stares at the horizon. The wind blows through the wheat, whispering across miles of land bought with blood. Howard drops beside him. Think it's worth it? Miller doesn't answer right away. Then softly, ask me when it's over. They sit there, silent, watching the sky fill with new planes heading inland, reinforcements, supplies, the future. Each one glints silver in the sunlight, like promises the world keeps forgetting to keep. June 8th, 1944. Normandy. The fields are quiet now, but it is the kind of quiet that hums with ghosts. The thunder of the ships has faded beyond the horizon. Smoke drifts lazily over the hedgerows. What was once France is now a patchwork of craters, barbed wire, and silence. The Americans call it secured territory. The French just call it what it is: home, broken and half-buried under the weight of someone else's war. Private John Miller walks down a dirt road lined with wrecked trucks and shattered helmets. His boots crunch over glass. His uniform is stiff with dried salt and blood. Every step feels borrowed. They pass through another village, half alive, half dead. The church still stands, its bell twisted, its tower riddled with holes. Children peek from doorways, eyes wide, unblinking. Old women carry buckets to fetch water from a well that now smells faintly of gunpowder. A man in a flat cap salutes them awkwardly, saying, "Merci, merci beaucoup." Miller nods but doesn't speak. What can you say to people whose world you've just burned to save? The faces of liberation. In the village square, medics set up a field hospital. Stretchers line the cobblestones, bodies under blankets, moans drifting into the air like smoke. An old woman kneels beside a wounded American and crosses herself. "Dieu vous bénisse," she whispers. He doesn't understand the words, but he smiles anyway. Howard brings Miller a tin of water. "They think we're heroes," he says. Miller takes a drink, wipes his mouth. "Give it a few days. When they see what's left, they'll stop cheering. Across the square, an officer from the 2nd Rangers argues with an artillery spotter about a farmhouse on the ridge. "Snipers there," he says. "Shell it." A French boy overhears, shouts something angry. "Ma maison! Ma maison!" The officer doesn't understand, but Miller does. He steps in. "That's his house," he says. The officer frowns. "You want to go knock on the door and ask them to leave?" Miller looks up at the house, then at the boy. "No," he says finally. "Just wait 10 minutes. The officer hesitates, then nods. They wait. 10 minutes later, 2 Germans slip out the back door and vanish into the fields. The farmhouse remains standing. So does the boy's childhood. The weight of what's won. By afternoon, the sky turns clear and blue, the kind of beautiful that feels cruel. The sun shines on everything, the living and the dead, the ruined and the spared. Miller's platoon is down to 12 men. They dig foxholes on the edge of town, shovels scraping against stones. The ground is thick with shrapnel. Every scoop unearths fragments: a belt buckle, a spoon, a jawbone. The war doesn't care who it buries. Howard sits beside a wall, polishing his rifle. "They said once we hit France it'd be easy," he says. "Nothing about this is easy," Miller replies. Howard chuckles bitterly. "Guess that's why they call it a war." A priest walks through the street, blessing the fallen in Latin. He's out of holy water, so he uses rainwater from a helmet. No one notices the difference. At the edge of the village, a small group of Germans surrenders. Boys in gray uniforms, terrified and hungry. They raise their hands, drop their rifles, and stare at the Americans as if seeing another species. One of them, maybe 16, says in broken English, "No Hitler, no more fight." Howard looks at Miller. "You believe him?" Miller shrugs. "He believes it, and that's enough." That night, under a tarp that flaps in the wind, Miller finally reads his wife's letter. The ink has bled into the paper, but the words are still there. "John, if you can't come home, promise me you'll help someone else's son get home. That will be enough." He folds the letter, presses it to his chest, and exhales. For the first time since he stepped off the boat, his hands are steady. Howard sits nearby, writing his own. "Dear Mom, still breathing. France smells like mud and smoke. Don't worry, I'm fine. We're winning, I think." He stops, stares at the paper for a long moment, then adds, "Love you. Tell Dad I finally learned how to swim." 3. Howard fully trees. Just before dawn, a flare lights the sky green. The sound of engines follows, tanks maybe, or trucks. Then gunfire. The Germans are counterattacking. "Positions!" Miller shouts. The night erupts into chaos again. Machine guns chatter, mortars whistle. The air turns white with smoke. Miller's men fire until their rifles burn their hands. The ground shakes. A shell hits the church, collapsing what's left of the tower. The bell crashes down, rolling into the square with a deep, hollow clang that sounds like the earth itself mourning. For an hour, the fight rages. Then it's over as quickly as it began. The enemy breaks and flees east. Dawn returns, pale and cold. The church smolders. The priest is gone. Howard looks at Miller. "Still think it's worth it?" Miller doesn't answer. He just looks at the rising sun and says, "It has to be." The morning after the miracle. June 9th. The countryside stretches out before them, quiet, green, endless. The invasion has succeeded. France is waking up. The Allies are moving inland. But for the men who fought on Omaha, the victory feels small, fragile, like a glass too easy to break. They march past wrecked tanks, broken carts, cows grazing beside burned trucks. Life goes on, as it always does, stepping carefully over the dead. At the edge of a field, a little girl waves a small French flag, her face smudged with dirt. Miller smiles and waves back. She doesn't stop smiling until they're gone. Behind them, the beach lies hidden by mist. Soon it will fill with supplies, tanks, tents, and new faces. But the sand will never be clean again. Miller walks with the others toward the next battle, the next village, the next promise of safety that never comes. He doesn't look back. June 10th, 1944, England. The radio crackles in the kitchens of London, New York, and Los Angeles. The static clears, and a calm, serious voice speaks. This morning, Allied forces successfully established a foothold on the coast of France. The liberation of Europe has begun. People stop whatever they're doing. In cafes, factories, schools, silence. Then cheers, cautious at first, then louder, spilling into the streets. Church bells ring in every town. Flags unfurl from windows that have been shuttered for years. After half a decade of darkness, the world dares to believe in light again. But on the beaches of Normandy, that light still feels far away. The cost of a beginning. The sea is calm now. The tide moves in and out like breathing. The wreckage remains. Boats half sunk in the shallows. Helmets bobbing in the surf. Rifles scattered like driftwood. The air smells of salt, oil, and something ancient. The scent of history, written in blood. Military photographers walk the sand, capturing images that will one day define an era. Soldiers kneeling in prayer among corpses. Medics carrying stretchers through smoke. The black crosses of German defenses twisted and broken. These photographs will appear in newspapers across the world with one word printed beneath them: victory. But for the men who survived, that word feels too heavy. Private John Miller sits in a foxhole on the edge of a hedgerow, watching the sunrise over the fields they took. His face is older now, though only 3 days have passed. Howard sits beside him, quiet, eating a piece of hard bread that tastes of ash. "They'll write about this," Howard says. "They'll call it glory." Miller shakes his head. "They'll call it D-Day, and we'll just call it Tuesday." They share a weak laugh, the kind men share when laughter is all they have left. Thousands of miles away, in a small town in Ohio, a woman listens to the same broadcast on her kitchen radio. She holds a letter with her husband's name on it, written in her own handwriting months ago. It was never answered. She turns up the volume, hearing the words Omaha Beach, and whispers, "Please come home." In New York, ticker tape rains down from office windows. Headlines scream, "Allies in France." Crowds flood Times Square, waving flags, singing, crying. A man in uniform kisses a nurse on the cheek. The photograph will become famous, but for now, it's just two strangers clinging to hope. Across the Atlantic, the bells of Notre Dame ring for the first time since 1940. France breathes again. In Berlin, Hitler pounds his desk, shouting at generals who can no longer meet his eyes. The Reichstag walls tremble from the sound of a distant future closing in. And on the Channel, hospital ships glide through the fog, carrying the broken, the burned, the lucky. The nurses move quietly among them, whispering names, promises, prayers. In the following days, the beaches fill not with soldiers, but with builders. Bulldozers clear wreckage. Engineers lay metal roads. Hundreds of ships unload tanks, food, fuel, everything needed for the long march east. The invasion has become an occupation. The occupation will become a liberation. The liberation will become history. On June 12th, General Eisenhower steps onto the beach. He walks past the burnt vehicles and broken wire, past the bodies already being buried in neat rows. He removes his cap. They did it, he says softly. God help us all. They actually did it. Nearby, a chaplain reads over a mass grave. They came not to conquer, but to free. May their courage outlive their names. The wind catches the edge of his Bible and flips the page to Psalm 46. Be still, and know that I am God. Weeks later, Paris will rise. Months later, Berlin will fall. A year later, the war will end. But the men who walked through the surf at Omaha will never see the world the same way again. Miller and Howard march east with the rest, through fields blooming again, through towns rebuilt on bones. Sometimes they find themselves laughing, sometimes crying, sometimes both. They fight, they survive, they forget, they remember. On a quiet morning, Miller finds a letter on his cot, forwarded from home. Inside is a photograph of his wife standing by their farmhouse, the fields behind her golden in the sun. On the back, she has written, "You kept your promise. Someone else's son came home." He folds it carefully, places it next to the old letter in his pocket, and smiles for the first time in months. The shore of memory. Years pass. The war ends. The beaches of Normandy turn green again. The bunkers crumble into the cliffs. The tides wash the sand clean. But the ghosts stay. On June 6, 1954, 10 years after the invasion, veterans gather at Omaha Beach. They stand in the wind, older now, gray at the edges, their uniforms tight across softer faces. Some bring their children, some bring flowers. None bring weapons. A priest speaks. For those who died here, this was not a beach, it was a doorway. On the other side of it stood freedom. They bow their heads. The wind carries the smell of salt and grass, the sound of waves whispering over stones. In the distance, a child runs along the surf, laughing, leaving footprints where once there were none. Epilogue. Decades later, the name Normandy still means more than geography. It means the moment the world decided to fight back against darkness. It means the day courage had no choice but to exist. It means sacrifice written in sand and salt water. Tourists visit now. They take photographs, collect shells, touch the rusted metal still buried beneath the dunes. Few notice how quiet the sea is there, as if it remembers to lower its voice out of respect. Every June the tide returns with the dawn, washing over the same stretch of sand where history was born. And if you stand there long enough, with the wind in your ears and the waves at your feet, you can almost hear it. The thunder of engines, the shout of orders, the heartbeat of a world trying to save itself. The sound fades, replaced by the hush of the ocean. Timeless, patient, forgiving. It carries with it the whisper of every man who stepped off a boat into hell and never came back. We came as soldiers, it says. We left as ghosts. The waves close, and the beach sleeps again.